They told me real men don't wear dresses. Those exact words came from my best friend, of all people. It was supposed to be a joke, a harmless laugh among friends. But something about the way he said it, loud, mocking with that half-smirk, hit a part of me I'd kept buried for years. I laughed it off at the time, pretending not to care, but inside something shifted. It was like a door creaked open, one that I'd always kept locked tight. The truth is, I'd always been curious. Even as a kid, I remembered sneaking into my mother's room when she wasn't home, just to run my hands across the soft fabric of her dresses. I couldn't explain it then. It wasn't about wanting to be someone else. It was about how it made me feel. Complete. Like the noise in my head finally stopped for a moment. But life has a way of making you hide parts of yourself. Growing up, every time someone said, "Man up," I learned to put another layer over that quiet part of me. I learned how to walk, talk, and act like what everyone said a man should be. It became a performance, one I got too good at. No one suspected a thing. But that day when my friend said those words, it was like someone tugged at the mask, and I wasn't sure I could keep it on anymore. It happened during a casual get-together. There were 5 of us in the living room, playing some dumb game where you had to describe a celebrity's outfit. I mentioned something about how stylish a certain look was, maybe a bit too enthusiastically. My friend grinned and said, "What are you, man? Real men don't wear dresses." Everyone laughed, including me. But the laughter echoed weirdly in my head, hollow and distant. I smiled on the outside, but inside I felt my chest tighten. The rest of the evening went on as if nothing happened, but I couldn't stop replaying that line. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the words looping in my mind. Real men don't wear dresses. What did that even mean? Who decided that? And why did I feel this pull inside me every time I thought about it? I didn't want to prove him wrong out of anger. I wanted to prove something to myself. I wanted to know what would happen if I stopped hiding. The next morning, I woke up with this strange determination. I didn't even know where it came from. I just knew I couldn't go on pretending forever. I took a long shower, trying to think of reasons not to do what I was planning, but none of them felt strong enough to stop me. I told myself it was just curiosity, a one-time thing, something I needed to get out of my system. When I went out that afternoon, I told my friends I had errands to run. In reality, I drove to a part of town where no one knew me. My heart was pounding as I parked the car and walked into a small boutique. It wasn't a chain store, more like a cozy, quiet place run by an older woman who smiled as soon as I stepped in. "Looking for something for someone special?" she asked. My throat went dry. For a moment I almost turned around and left. But then I said, "Actually, it's for me." She blinked, but she didn't laugh. She didn't even flinch. "All right," she said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Let's find something you like." Something about her calmness made it easier to breathe. I followed her through the racks of clothes, touching fabrics, pretending to compare colors while my heart raced like I was committing some kind of crime. She handed me a simple dress. Navy blue, soft cotton, nothing flashy. "Try this one," she said gently. "I think it'll suit you." Inside the fitting room, I stood there for a long moment, just staring at myself in the mirror. My hands trembled as I lifted the dress. The moment I slipped it over my head, it was like stepping into another version of myself, one I'd kept hidden for far too long. The fabric brushed against my skin, and I felt my heartbeat slow. I looked at my reflection, uncertain at first, then curious. I didn't recognize the person staring back at me, but for the first time in years I felt right. I turned from side to side, adjusting the fabric, studying every detail. My mind was a storm, fear, relief, shame, wonder, all swirling together. Then I heard a gentle knock on the door. "How's it fit?" the woman asked. My voice caught in my throat. "It's good," I said softly. When I stepped out, she smiled at me in this knowing way. "You look comfortable," she said. I nodded, unable to find words. She didn't make it strange. She just wrapped it up for me and wished me a good day. I walked out of that shop with the dress in a plain brown bag, clutching it like a secret I wasn't ready to share. That night I put it on again. The room was quiet. The only sound was my heartbeat. I looked at myself in the mirror under the dim light, and for a second I smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile I gave the world. It was smaller, realer. It was mine. But that small piece didn't last long. The next day I got a text from my friend, the same one who made the joke. "Hey, we're meeting again tonight. Don't be late." I looked at my phone and felt a flicker of something. Fear, maybe, or defiance. Because now, after what I'd done, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't go back to pretending nothing had changed. Something inside me had woken up. And that's where it started. One careless joke, one impulsive decision. And suddenly I was standing at the edge of something much bigger than I'd ever imagined. I didn't know it yet, but that night in the boutique would change everything. It wasn't just about wearing a dress anymore. It was about facing who I really was, and deciding if I was brave enough to stop hiding. The next evening, as I got ready to meet my friends, I felt like I was living two lives. On the surface, I was the same old me, the same jeans, hoodie, and easygoing grin. But underneath, I couldn't stop thinking about the dress folded neatly in my drawer at home. I could still feel the texture of it against my skin, the strange sense of calm it gave me. I'd never experienced anything like that before. It wasn't about trying to look like someone else. It was about feeling like myself for the first time. When I met my friends at the cafe, everything felt off. They laughed and talked the same as always, but I couldn't connect. Every joke, every loud comment about manly stuff, made me feel a little more detached. I wasn't angry at them. It was like I just stepped into a different world, and they were still in the old one. At one point, the same friend from before nudged me and said, "You've been quiet lately, man. You all right?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." He shrugged and went back to his story, but I caught the way he looked at me. Curious, maybe a little confused. I wondered if he could sense something different. I wanted to tell them the truth, to say, "You were wrong. Real men can wear dresses." But the words stuck in my throat. That night when I got home, I didn't even turn on the lights. I went straight to my room, opened the drawer, and took out the dress again. Just holding it made my pulse quicken. I slipped it on and stood in front of the mirror. There I was, still me but softer somehow. My reflection wasn't mocking or strange anymore. It looked peaceful. It looked honest. I started experimenting in small ways after that. I bought a few more clothes. Nothing extreme, just things that felt right. Loose blouses, lighter colors, softer fabrics. I didn't wear them outside yet. It was just for me. A secret world that existed behind closed doors. But even that felt risky. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway or a phone notification buzzed, I'd panic, afraid someone would find out. One Saturday morning I was home alone. My parents were visiting relatives, and my friends were out. I had the entire house to myself. I decided just for once I'd go all in. Not just a dress, makeup, hair, everything. I'd watched enough tutorials to know the basics, though my hands were shaking as I tried to apply foundation. The first few attempts were a disaster. I looked ridiculous at first and I almost gave up. But then I took a breath, started again, slower this time. By the time I finished, something inside me shifted again. I didn't look perfect. Not even close, but it didn't matter. The person in the mirror looked alive. I turned, smiled, even laughed a little. I felt free in a way that scared me. Because freedom like that always comes with consequences. That freedom didn't last long. I was still twirling in front of the mirror when I heard the sound of a car door outside. My heart dropped. My parents weren't supposed to be home until evening. Froze, listening. Voices, too clear to ignore. They were home early. I rushed to change, nearly tripping as I pulled the dress over my head. I wiped at the makeup with tissues, leaving smudges all over my face. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the lipstick, and it rolled under the bed. I barely had time to throw everything in a drawer before the door opened. My mother called from downstairs. "You home?" "Yeah," I yelled, voice cracking. I ran to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, tried to look normal. When I looked in the mirror again, I didn't recognize myself. not because of the makeup, but because of the fear in my eyes. I walked downstairs, forcing a calm smile. They didn't suspect anything, not at first. But my mother looked at me curiously. "Your face is red," she said. "I was working out," I lied. She nodded slowly but didn't press further. I spent the rest of the day avoiding them, my mind spinning with what could have happened. I realized how fragile my secret was, how close I was to being exposed. And yet, the idea didn't terrify me as much as it used to. There was a small, growing part of me that wondered what would happen if I stopped hiding. That thought followed me for days. I started thinking about how society defines strength, masculinity, identity. All these invisible rules we follow without question. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Why did I have to keep pretending just to make others comfortable? Why couldn't I just exist as I was? The breaking point came a week later. My friends and I were hanging out again, this time at a small get-together. The same guy who made that joke before was there. At some point, someone brought up a video they'd seen online. A man confidently walking down a runway in a floral dress. They laughed, said things like, "What's wrong with guys these days?" And I felt my chest tighten. I tried to stay quiet, but something inside me snapped. "What's wrong with it?" I said, maybe louder than I intended. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me. My friend raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking. "What's wrong with someone wearing what they want? Who made the rule that clothes have a gender?" They stared at me like I'd grown another head. Someone chuckled awkwardly. My friend smirked. "You sound like you've been thinking about this a lot." I stared back, heart pounding. Maybe I have. The silence that followed was deafening. I excused myself a few minutes later and walked out, leaving them speechless. My hands were trembling, but for the first time I didn't care what they thought. I'd spoken my truth, just a fragment of it, but it felt like 1,000 pounds had lifted from my chest. That night, I sat in front of the mirror again, wearing my favorite dress, and whispered to my reflection. "They told me real men don't wear dresses, but maybe they're wrong." That was the night I decided to stop being afraid. The days that followed were heavy, like I was walking with a secret too big for the world to hold. After that night, my friends acted strange. They didn't bring up what I'd said, but the silence between us said enough. The jokes became fewer, the texts slower. It was like they were unsure of me now, like they didn't know how to fit me into the version of normal they'd built in their heads. I told myself I didn't care, but every unread message, every missed call that never came, hurt more than I wanted to admit. Still, something inside me had changed permanently. I couldn't unsee the truth about myself anymore. I started spending more time alone, not because I wanted to hide, but because I was finally learning who I was without the noise of other people's opinions. My room became my sanctuary. The mirror that once scared me had turned into a silent friend, one that reflected not just how I looked, but who I was becoming. It started small, with confidence in the little things. I began painting my nails on weekends when I knew no one would see. I'd sit by the window, sunlight spilling over my hands, watching the color dry. The first time I did it, my heart was pounding, but as I looked at the glossy finish, something like pride swelled in my chest. It wasn't about rebellion, it was about honesty. Still, fear clung to me. I kept imagining what would happen if someone found out. The looks, the whispers, the judgment. It was a strange paradox. I was discovering freedom and fear at the same time. But every time doubt whispered in my ear, I remembered that moment in the boutique, the kind smile of the woman who hadn't judged me. That small act of kindness was like an anchor. One afternoon, while scrolling online, I stumbled upon a local community event, a fashion-themed charity night encouraging people to express themselves. They called it Freedom Threads. The flyer said everyone was welcome, no matter how they identified. I stared at it for a long time. My heart raced at the idea of going. It was exactly the kind of thing I needed, but also exactly the kind of thing that terrified me. For 2 days I couldn't stop thinking about it. The thought of walking into a public place, dressed as my truest self, made me sick with anxiety. I tried to imagine how people would look at me, what they'd say. But then another voice whispered, "What if, for once, someone looked at me and saw me?" I didn't tell anyone. On the day of the event, I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling as I unfolded the navy blue dress from the drawer. It was the same one from that first day, the one that started it all. I'd taken care of it, washed it, folded it neatly like something sacred. I slipped it on slowly, my breath shallow but steady. Then came the makeup. Light, careful strokes, nothing too dramatic. I wanted to look like myself, not like someone pretending. When I was done, I looked at my reflection and whispered, "This is me." As I stood by the door, my courage faltered. I almost turned back twice, but something deep inside wouldn't let me. I walked outside, clutching my small purse, feeling every heartbeat echo in my chest. The air was cool, and as I got into the car, I could feel my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The drive to the event felt endless. Every stoplight made me question myself. I imagined the worst, someone laughing, pointing, recording. But when I finally arrived, what I saw made me pause. The venue was glowing with soft lights, and people of all kinds were walking in. Different clothes, different expressions, but all with the same quiet bravery in their steps. As I entered, no one stared. No one laughed. The world didn't end. I walked among them, my pulse steadying, and for the first time I wasn't hiding. I smiled and people smiled back. Some complimented my outfit. One woman even said, "That dress really suits you." The words almost broke me. Not out of sadness but relief. There was a small stage where people were invited to share their stories. How they found courage to be themselves. I didn't plan to speak, but when the host asked if anyone wanted to say something, my hand rose before I even realized what I was doing. My legs felt like they were made of glass as I walked up to the microphone. I looked at the crowd. Dozens of faces, all watching, waiting. My throat was dry. For a moment I thought I might faint. But then I remembered that night at the cafe, those words. "Real men don't wear dresses." I took a deep breath. "I used to believe that," I said softly. "That real men don't cry, don't show weakness, don't wear dresses." I believed it because that's what everyone told me. But it wasn't true. Real men, real people, are the ones who have the courage to be honest about who they are, no matter what anyone thinks. A hush fell over the crowd. My voice trembled, but I kept going. "I'm standing here wearing something that used to scare me. But it doesn't anymore. Because this," I gestured to myself, "this feels right. And if that makes me less of a man in someone's eyes, then maybe it's time we redefine what being a man really means." The applause that followed wasn't loud or chaotic. It was gentle, genuine, like waves against the shore. I stepped down from the stage with tears in my eyes, but they weren't tears of fear anymore. They were release. That night, driving home, I looked out the window at the city lights and smiled. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of who I was becoming. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I didn't need them. I had something better, peace. But peace has a way of testing you. Because the next morning, I woke up to a message that would challenge everything I just found. The message came early the next morning, while the glow from the previous night still lingered in my chest. My phone buzzed beside me, and when I picked it up, the name on the screen froze me mid-breath. It was my best friend, the same one who had said those words that started everything. I hadn't heard from him in days. For a moment I thought about ignoring it, pretending I was still asleep. But something made me open it. It wasn't just one message, it was 3. The first said, "Bro, we need to talk." The second one had a link attached. The third simply said, "Is this you?" My stomach dropped. I clicked the link, my hands shaking. It led to a social media post from the event last night. Someone had taken a photo during my short speech. Me, standing there in that navy blue dress, microphone in hand, looking braver than I'd ever felt. But now, seeing it through a phone screen, the reality hit differently. The photo was starting to spread. People had already commented, some supportive, others cruel. My heart pounded in my chest. My secret, no, my truth was out. I stared at the screen, unable to move. My reflection in the dark phone screen looked terrified. I'd known this might happen one day, but I thought I'd be ready. I wasn't. Not yet. Minutes passed before I finally typed back. Yeah, that's me. His reply came almost instantly. Why didn't you tell me, man? I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that you've been living behind a wall for years, afraid they'd be the one to tear it down? I typed, deleted, retyped, and finally sent. Because I was scared. You wouldn't have understood. There was a long pause. The kind of silence that hurts even through a screen. Then came his response. You're right. I don't understand. But I want to. I blinked, unsure if I'd read that right. I want to. The words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't end the way I feared. He asked to meet later that evening, somewhere quiet. I agreed, though my nerves were already unraveling. All day I couldn't focus. Every scenario played in my mind. Anger, confusion, rejection. But another small part of me, the same one that had stood on that stage, whispered maybe this is the beginning of something new. When I arrived at the park that evening, the sky was painted with soft shades of orange and gold. He was already there, sitting on a bench. I could tell he'd been waiting. I walked up slowly, every step echoing louder than it should have. He looked up, and for a second neither of us spoke. Then he sighed and said, "So it was you." "Yeah," I said quietly. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Man, I don't even know what to say. I mean, you looked happy in that picture. Like really happy. But I was shocked. I never thought that I'd do something like that." I finished for him. He nodded. "Yeah." I sat beside him, the cool evening air wrapping around us. "Neither did I admitted. But it wasn't just a random thing. It's who I've always been. I just never had the courage to show it." He was quiet for a long time. The sound of kids playing in the distance filled the silence. Finally he spoke. "You know, when I said that thing, that real men don't wear dresses joke, I didn't mean it to hurt you." "I know," I said softly. "But it did. It made me think about how much I was hiding." He exhaled slowly, his voice low. "I was stupid. I didn't realize what I was saying." We sat there, both lost in thought. Then he looked at me, and there was something different in his eyes. Something softer. "So, what now? Are you going to keep doing this?" I smiled faintly. "I don't think I can stop. Not after finally being honest with myself." He nodded, looking at the ground. "You're braver than me, man. Most people never have the guts to be that real." The tension in my chest loosened just a little. I hadn't expected acceptance, not right away, but what I got was even better. Understanding. When I got home that night, I thought about everything that had happened. The photo, the fear, the conversation. My secret was out now. People knew. The thought still made my stomach twist, but it also felt strangely freeing. I didn't have to hide anymore. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from others. Some kind, some cruel, and some from people who admitted they felt the same way but never dared to express it. That surprised me. I realized my small act of courage had rippled farther than I thought. I wasn't just proving something to myself anymore. I was showing others that it was okay to question what the world told them they couldn't be. Then came the hardest moment of all, telling my parents. I knew it was inevitable. The photo was spreading fast, and it wouldn't be long before they saw it. I decided I'd rather they hear it from me. I sat them down one evening, heart hammering, palms sweating. My mother looked concerned, my father unreadable. "I need to tell you something," I began, voice trembling. "You might have seen a picture online. And yes, it's me. I went to an event where people could dress however they wanted. And I wore a dress. Because it makes me feel like myself." My mother's eyes softened, but my father's face stayed still, his jaw tight. He didn't speak for what felt like forever. Then finally he said, "I don't understand this." "I know," I said quietly. "You don't have to understand right now. I just need you to know that this is who I am. And I'm not ashamed of it anymore." He stood up, walked a few steps away, and then stopped. "You're still my son," he said, voice low but steady. "I don't get it. But I'll try." Those words broke me. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them until they left his mouth. My mother came over and hugged me, whispering, "I'm proud of you for being honest." For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift completely. The truth was out, and somehow the world hadn't fallen apart. In fact, it felt like it had just started to rebuild itself, stronger, clearer, freer. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. Same navy blue dress, same quiet smile. But this time something had changed. The reflection looking back wasn't someone pretending anymore. It was me, whole, seen and real. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew this much. I wasn't going back. After my parents' quiet acceptance, something inside me truly began to heal. It was as if years of pressure had suddenly lifted, and for the first time I could breathe without guilt. But the world outside my home was still different. It wasn't as kind, not always. Some people whispered, some avoided me, and others acted like nothing had changed even though everything had. Still, none of that stopped me. The more I stepped into the truth of who I was, the stronger I felt. I started small, wearing lighter fabrics, experimenting with softer colors even in public. The first time I left the house in something even slightly feminine, a loose cream-colored top that could pass as unisex, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I could feel people's eyes on me even when they probably weren't looking. It wasn't easy. Every step felt like a statement, a silent declaration that I was done hiding. There were good days and bad ones. On some mornings I felt unstoppable, confident enough to walk through the city with my head high. On others, I'd catch a stranger's stare and feel that old fear creeping back. But each time it happened, I'd remember the night on stage at Freedom Threads, the way the crowd had clapped, the way I'd felt weightless for the first time. That memory became my armor. My friend, the one who once said those fateful words, stuck around more than I expected. He didn't always know what to say, but he tried. One day he surprised me by showing up with a small shopping bag. "Figured you might like this," he said, awkwardly handing it over. Inside was a scarf, soft and colorful. "It's not really my thing," he added quickly, "but it reminded me of that night you talked on stage." I laughed, touched by the gesture. "You're learning," I said. He grinned. "Guess we both are." That simple act meant more than I could say. It wasn't about the scarf, it was about acknowledgement. It was proof that people could change, even the ones who didn't understand at first. Weeks passed, and I kept exploring this new version of myself. I started journaling about my feelings, sketching outfits I'd one day like to wear, imagining a life where I didn't have to think twice before stepping out the door. Every entry began with the same line. "They told me real men don't wear dresses." It had become a mantra, not of pain anymore, but of defiance and growth. One evening, I got a message from the woman who had organized the Freedom Threads event. She said they were hosting another one and asked if I'd be interested in being part of the panel discussion. "Your story inspired a lot of people," she wrote. "You gave others courage that night." I sat there staring at the message, my heart pounding with disbelief. Me. The same person who once hid behind closed doors, terrified of a joke, now being asked to speak as someone who inspired others. It didn't seem real. But I said yes. I didn't even hesitate this time. The night of the event, I chose a simple but elegant outfit, a light gray dress with subtle silver stitching. As I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving, I felt that familiar calmness again. The nerves were still there, but beneath them was something stronger: pride. The venue was larger this time, filled with more people, more lights, more cameras. I could hear the murmur of the crowd as I stepped onto the stage, my hands slightly trembling. The host smiled warmly. "Please welcome someone whose courage helped redefine what it means to be yourself." Applause followed. I looked out at the faces before me, some nervous, some excited, some just curious, and realized that every one of them was here searching for something the same way I once did. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and said, "I used to think courage meant pretending to be strong. Now I know courage means being honest, even when it scares you." I shared my story, Not just the pretty parts but the fear, the doubt, the nights I couldn't sleep. I told them about that joke, that first dress, that photo, the fear of being exposed, and the peace that came after. I saw heads nodding, eyes glistening, people holding on to every word. Afterward, a young person came up to me, maybe 17 or 18, trembling a little. "I saw your photo online," they said. "I thought, if you could do it, maybe I could too." I didn't know what to say at first. My throat tightened, but I smiled and said, "You can. And when you do, you'll realize the world isn't as scary as it seems. It's waiting for you to be yourself." That moment stayed with me long after the lights went out. I'd once thought that wearing a dress would make the world turn against me, but it had done the opposite. It had helped me find a world I never knew existed, full of people who understood, who felt the same longing to be free. But life wasn't all triumphs. There were still moments of quiet struggle, times when the weight of judgment felt heavy again. Some co-workers whispered when I showed up in softer clothes. A few old friends drifted away completely. Those losses hurt, but they didn't destroy me. Because I'd gained something far greater. Authenticity. One late evening, I stood by the window of my room, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. I remembered the boy who used to stare at his mother's dresses in secret, afraid of what those feelings meant. If I could speak to him now, I'd tell him he wasn't broken. I'd tell him that one day, he'd wear that same softness with pride. That thought brought a smile to my face. I wrapped the scarf my friend had given me around my shoulders, feeling its warmth. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to hide from the world, or from myself. And though I didn't know it yet, that peace was about to be tested one last time, in a way that would make me question everything I'd built. It started with a message request on my social media. Someone I didn't recognize. Their profile picture was blank, and the name was fake, but the words were all too familiar. "You think you're brave. You're just a man in a dress. Stop embarrassing yourself." I stared at the screen, frozen. It had been months since I'd faced anything like that, and I thought I was past caring. But somehow those words still cut deep. I didn't reply. I told myself not to. But I kept reading the message again and again until the letters blurred. More followed. Different accounts. The same poison. Some called me disgusting, others mocked my photos, some even used my real name. It felt like being dragged backward into the darkness I thought I'd escaped. I deleted the messages, blocked the accounts, but the damage had already been done. I began to second-guess every post, every photo. I hesitated before leaving the house again. I even caught myself avoiding mirrors, afraid of seeing that version of me that others hated so freely. One evening, while sitting in silence, my phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't hate. It was the organizer from Freedom Threads. She asked if I was okay. Apparently, someone had posted screenshots of the hateful messages, and the community had rallied behind me. Messages of love and support flooded my inbox. People from different parts of the world shared how my story gave them courage. That night, as I read those kind words, something inside me shifted again. I realized that no matter how many people tried to tear me down, there were always more ready to lift me up. A few days later, I decided to post something. Not defensive, not angry, just honest. I wrote, "They told me real men don't wear dresses. Maybe they're right. Because I'm not trying to be a real man anymore. I'm just trying to be real. And that's enough for me." The post went viral. Within days, thousands of comments poured in. Some from strangers who shared similar stories, others from allies simply saying thank you. For the first time, I didn't feel like my pain was just mine. It was part of something larger, something beautiful. My parents saw the post too. My mother called me, her voice trembling. "We're proud of you," she said softly. "You've shown more courage than anyone I know." That simple sentence made me cry harder than I ever had before. Not out of sadness but relief. I realized that I had finally stopped waiting for the world to accept me. I had learned to accept myself. In the months that followed, I started speaking at local events, sharing my story with others who were still hiding. Some were young, afraid of what their families might think. Others were older, burdened by years of secrecy. Each time I'd look them in the eyes and say, the fear never really goes away, but neither does the strength you build by facing it. Life slowly became normal again. I got a new job where people didn't care how I dressed. My wardrobe grew more colorful, and so did my confidence. Every morning when I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw confusion. I saw harmony. One evening, as I walked through a quiet park, I saw a small group of teens laughing near a fountain. One of them, a shy-looking boy, was wearing nail polish, clearly nervous but proud. Our eyes met briefly and he smiled back. No words were needed. That single look said everything. You're not alone anymore. Later that night I went home and found that old photo, the one my friend had taken, the one that started it all. The lighting was terrible, the makeup uneven, but the person in that picture looked free. I framed it and placed it on my desk. Every time I see it now, I don't think about the fear or the judgment. I think about the journey, the way one careless joke turned into a path of self-discovery, pain, and, ultimately, peace. I've learned that transformation isn't about changing into someone new. It's about uncovering the person you were always meant to be. So when people still ask me, why dresses? I smile and answer, because they helped me find myself. And maybe that's all any of us are really trying to do. Find the version of ourselves that finally feels like home. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel.